me some good advice on communicating risk to the business.
Okay, so good advice would be transparent. Explain what you do, don't hold back. Easy and simple.
All right, I like that. Taher, give me the opposite. Give me some bad advice on how to communicate risk to the business.
We stopped 1,000 hacks last night.
I like that. All right, Neetzen, one up him. Give me some worse advice on communicating risk to the business.
Wow, okay. I'll top Tahir. We had a million IPS alerts blocked last night. So we can go like this forever.
Oh, so you're just upping the number. That's all you're doing. Okay.
No, but this
Get
is IPS
ready. It's
alerts.
Super Cyber
All
Friday.
right, let's start this show. Hey, everybody, welcome to Super Cyber Friday. Today's topic is hacking the conversation about risk, an hour of critical thinking about how to elevate communication with the business. My guest, who you just met, is Taher El Gamal, who is a partner over at Evolution Equity Partners, and Neetzen Ziv, who's the CEO and co-founder for Ox Security. And guess what? Ox Security is our spectacular sponsor for this very episode. All right, for those who've never joined us before, here are all the wonderful different ways you can participate. We have the chat room, which most of you have probably discovered. You can submit your bad idea, which I know you're going to come up with good ones, how not to talk to the business about risk. You got a couple examples there. Don't just increase the number like they just did. Submit now. We also want to know your good tips. So we call that the 10% better. We don't need to solve the whole problem in one tip. Just one little tip that'll improve things, and that is how to elevate your conversations around risk. You can join us on video at any time. Just type "bring me on," and our producer, Aaron, will try to bring as many of you on to ask a question or make a comment during the show. Please ask questions. Please. We love getting questions. We try to get to as many of them as possible. If you look on the right-hand side with all the icons on the right, there's a speech bubble with a question mark on it. Click on that and add a question. And you can also vote for your favorite question. All right, the lineup is like we normally do. We have good advice, bad advice, worse advice. We want your bad ideas. You want your 10% tips. We'll play the public interest. We'll play the Department of Yes. We'll have our last question advice. And we will also have our meetup, which is now on Discord, for those of you who don't know. And it's actually working out quite nicely on Discord. So if you don't already have a Discord account, please get a Discord account. And we will have you join us at the end of the show. It's a lot of fun. We're going to break everybody out into rooms of like 4 or 5 people each and have fun conversation. Then you can kind of move around. All right. Also, the link at the bottom of the screen is for next week's event, which is Hacking Generative AI Anxiety, an hour of critical thinking about how to create constructive outlets around this technology. That link will be up there for the duration of the show. You can click on it at any time during the show, and it'll open a completely separate window. It will not take you out of this, and you can register for next week's event while still very much enjoying this week's event as well. All right, let's get to the very first question at hand. This is a really open-ended one, but I'm going to start with you, Taher. How does a security professional effectively communicate risk? And really, this is going to be the whole discussion, but let's just sort of open up this sort of the beginning of the platform. How do you effectively communicate what cyber risk is to the business?
Yeah, I think the most important thing for a CISO, security executive in general, is to actually speak business, not speak technology, and not speak security.
Right. Yes.
And this is, I mean, most security people, most CISOs I know how to do that. They do understand what the business is, but it's the receiver of the communication is the important individual in this conversation, because cyber risk is not a topic that most people actually understand. People understand their part of the business. They're growing the business, they're building technology, they're selling things, whatever they are doing. In the board case, they're actually responsible for the corporate risk at large. And for the most part, board members understand financial risk. But cyber risk just dropped from the sky, and all of a sudden they're responsible for something completely different. And then they got people who are really, really good at what they're doing, but they're talking about technology things or running programs or talking to partners and this kind of thing. So cyber risk is actually a business topic. It is not a technology topic. It's not even a security topic. It's a business topic. And I think all of us in the security world need to learn how to talk to business people. And I'm including myself.
Okay. So Nitzan, I'm going to take this to you. I did what Taher explained is something I think we're all on the same page with. I think where it falls through, and this is what I want to know from you, is where are CISOs sort of having a hard time connecting the dots? Like, this risk is connected to this aspect of the business, which allows the business to do that. My feeling is that's where they either don't have the knowledge, don't know how to make the connection. Like, how I guess can we help CISOs make that connection? I guess.
I think that a lot of the challenge right now is simply having the right context. So imagine most of our organization have few thousands of endpoints, a few hundreds or thousands of applications, and now you've got a risk. So what does this mean? How do I translate it back to something that a business owner can understand? And I think that the challenge is simply pinpointing things and saying, why is this important more than other? Why is this really something that we need to handle right now versus just one more thing in the backlog that requires attention one day? And that's kind of the issue. Way too much noise. So if I'll take it one step backwards, I think a few years back, what we wanted is simply more visibility, but be careful what we wanted, because right now we've got the visibility, but it's overwhelming. And we kind of need to figure out from this entire huge noise, what is actually important and what is risk versus just one more line.
Mm-hmm. All right. Questions, please send in your questions. We would love to address this. All right. Is there a strategy, like, and again, Taher, you're talking about communicating the business, but, you don't want to sound like Chicken Little coming in with every darn risk. How do you make it clear, like, all right, this is one we really need to pay attention to, and this one we don't need to pay attention to? Like, how do you show the gradients of it, for that matter?
It's speak the language of the audience. Come on. And Cheryl, good to see you here. And you had a very nice comment on the side here. Cyber risk is in fact financial risk, but it's completely unquantifiable. That's the issue a board member is struggling with, because the regular financial risk says, hey, if you do a side letter with a customer to offer something on the side when you're signing a contract, you can actually quantify that in a simple way, maybe. But when you're saying, we're a target for ransomware attacks, or somebody can, hack our application and do XYZ and steal our data, quantifying that becomes a very different thing. So we need to simplify this communication to the audience. Mm-hmm. And just try to relate, why do security people why are security people doing what they're doing? Why are they building, protection things? Why are they preventing others from attacking things? And that conversation needs to just go away and basically say, we need to make sure that the company is not going to be an easy target for others. And, you can actually have a conversation about the financial risk side of cyber by comparing to others, because there is public data that people publish about how much of a financial a breach event, for example, has cost others in the current or a different kind of environment.
Nitzan, your video went out. Are you still there? Or you also muted?
Yeah.
Okay, now you're back. What happened there? You're back. All right. So one of the other good things, and all good points. What time are we at? We're in good time. So one of the things that comes up again, and we hear this on our shows all the time, is that the CISO is the great translator. Is that they are responsible for communicating risk to different departments and speaking a different language in different departments. I got to assume the way to do that is just make sure you spend your time in those departments and know how they communicate. Is there more to the story than that, Nitzan?
I do think that there's more to that, because part of the challenge is not just communicating the risk, but it's preventing the risk that comes next year and the year afterwards. And some of the discussion with the business owners saying, let's say perimeter, saying, I don't know what you want me to do with that. Please handle this, go away. How much does it cost? And part of the challenge is simply being able to explain, okay, this is something that will go away. It costs such and such, effort such and such, and that's it. It's something that you can pay and just get rid of. And it's not always just communication. Sometimes it's still simply doing it upfront.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. All right. We got a question came in. Let me see what this is. Well, I got to assume this is true. Taher, maybe you can speak to this. This comes from Santosh I, who says, how does risk play a vital role in cyber insurance premiums? So our understanding of risk, our ability to communicate risk, I'm assuming we talk about that to insurers as well. How does that play into cyber insurance premiums?
And of course it does. If you're underwriting an insurance, for a business, you want to understand how well they are protected so that you can not just design the premium correctly, but the coverage correctly. Because cyber insurance is not one thing. What you get protected from is what gets underwritten, and you need to understand exactly, what you have covered and what you do not have covered. And that is a very important conversation. So cyber risk is the core of everything. It's the core of the business risk, which does include, obviously, cyber insurance, among other things.
Do you have any experience with this yourself, Nitzan, about risk and insurance and how that is managed together? I mean, I got assuming the more you can prove your management of risk, the better you can control your insurance premiums.
So, of course, it depends quite a lot from the size of the organization and the actual risk. But the basic is somewhere in that company that provides the insurance, you've got some kind of a math based on X amount of questions. Now, if you have more incidents, of course, your premium is going to go up. If you already have a few of them published, yes, of course, it will go up. It is just like any other insurance. If you've got more risk, it's going to go up. If you've got more assets, it's going to go up. That's a simple math equation. So definitely, just in terms of reducing the cost, if you're more secure and you have less incidents, yes, it's going to be easier to get the insurance. By the way, part of the issue is sometimes the insurers are simply saying, we're not going to insure you. Your risk is too high. You're too much of a high profile.
Or they just can't communicate it. I got to assume also, if you're incapable of communicating it, forget it on insurance, right?
Mm-hmm. So insurance by itself, just doing the insurance is relatively straightforward. We actually just renewed our insurance recently. It's a bunch of questions. You need to answer them. And you need to remember that when you're communicating those risks, if you're by mistake saying something that is wrong, this is how the other side sees you. So you kind of need to be aware to what are the answers that you're going to answer, because they need to be very straightforward with what you understand on reality.
Oh, I want to jump to this question from James Sparenberg. This is a good one. As a player below the level of CISO, how do I put out information about risk and cost justification in a way my CISO can carry forward? My feeling is, while the CISO is a grand communicator, anything you can do to help them with that communications, I'm assuming, is warmly accepted. You're nodding your head, Taher.
Yeah. So look, depending on where in the CISO organization one lives. So if you're responsible for, the product, the application layer, you should actually communicate that our customers are going to suffer something because their data will be exposed, for example. So this is sort of the business side of communication. If someone is responsible for an infrastructure or the cloud side of things, then you can communicate. Our cloud infrastructure is improving because we did A, B, and C. So our risk is so there is always a risk to be communicated. And then the CISO will basically collect all of these things and combine them into a single risk communication to the board. But every part of a CISO organization has something to say about the cyber risk that the organization carries, of course.
Anything to add to that? And then we're going to jump to our next game, Nietzsche, with regards to James' question of how can the one sort of subordinate to the CISO help the CISO in this risk conversation?
So I'll give you a few examples from what we've seen. So first of all, usually the subordinates to the CISO have different domains of accountability: the Security Operations Center, networking, application security. The CISOs, most of them don't grow up knowing each one of those domains. So most CISOs came from GRC or networking. And application security is a great example where most of them lack the understanding of the subdomain. So translating the technical lists of what are the risks into what does this actually mean, so the CISO can take it to the business owner, that's a crucial part in the business. Just translating other languages that some CISOs are not fluent in.
All right, let's jump to our first game here.
Do you know what others are thinking? On the public interest.
All right, this is a simple game to play. Nietzsche and Taher, just to let you know, we have 4 questions here. I always sort of stress it's extraordinarily difficult to get all 4 right, even though this game is incredibly simple to play. You will see what I mean in just a second. The audience likes to play along. Audience, I challenge you to get all 4 of these right. I have not seen any of these. Our fantastic producer, Mr. Rich Stroffolino, produced these questions, so I'm going to play along as well. Here we go. Question number 1. Most average monthly search queries, is it A, assessment, mitigation, or response? This is a good question. What do you think it is? Nietzsche? A, B, or C?
I'm still trying to understand, what does it mean?
So what it means is, what are people searching on the internet, on Google specifically? Mm-hmm. Which of these terms do they search most? And this is everybody, not just cybersecurity professionals. Okay. So what do you think it is?
I'll probably say response.
C, response? I've been seeing a lot of C. You're saying response too?
I would also say response.
I'm going to say A, assessment. I'm going with A, assessment. Let's see what we get here. Assessment. All right, I won on that one. All right. Actually, response dead last on that. Well, your chance for going 4 for 4 is now gone, unfortunately. All right, let's see how we do on the second one.
That being right is by the majority. Is not really right or wrong. Because
the right or wrong, the whole thing
whatever you say is right in your opinion. Okay, I get
of course, it's right, but you're trying to guess.
This is like Family Feud style thing.
Exactly, it's Family Feud. You're trying to guess what everybody else says. That's what you're trying to guess. All right, now the most average monthly search queries for breach, vulnerability, or exploit.
I'll take the same logic. Vulnerability?
Vulnerability? What do you think, Taher?
I'll say breach.
I'm going breach just because it's in the news more, but again, maybe people search vulnerability more often. I'm going between D and E on this one. I definitely don't think it's exploit. I was thinking breach first, but I'm going breach. I'm going breach solely because it's more in the news than vulnerability. And let's see what happens. No, I was so wrong on exploit too.
Wow. Okay.
All right. So, okay.
The logic. There's a funnel. You start with a vulnerability. There's an exploit, and then there's a breach.
Okay. All right. So right now, Taher, unfortunately, got 0. I have 1. Nietzsche has 1. Let's see. Look on the next one. Oh, wow. There's 5 options here. Okay. Communication, conversation, implication, information, or organization. Wow. I'm going to say K, organization. That's what I'm going with. What do you think, Taher?
I'm going with J, information.
Information? Nietzsche?
I would go with K as well.
All right. We got 2 Ks and 1 J. What happens? Taher is on the board with information. Okay. All right. Very good. All right. We're tied up. 1 across. Not a stellar score for any of us. Let's see how we do on the last question. Board, leadership, management, and stakeholder. And now keep in mind, like, board can mean more things than the board. It could be literally a wooden board here. It could be other things. I am going to N on this one. Nietzsche?
So I'm struggling between leadership and management,
Hmm.
but I would go with N just because that's my letter.
By the way, Hadass notes that stakeholder can be about vampire slaying. Good point. Because a lot of people are looking at. I'm sorry. Which one did you just pick, Nietzsche? Because it was just
N, number
N.
N.
Okay, so we're both on management. And what do you say, Taher?
I'm going to go leadership because we need to be different.
All right. We could have a tie, Nietzsche, or
Yeah, that would
Taher
be
could
great.
break away. Let's see what it is. It is management. All right, Nietzsche and I
Nice
take the
one.
crown.
Good
I'm
job.
sorry about that, Taher.
No, it's all right.
All
I
right.
got number 2 here, which is not too bad.
Not too bad at all. Did anyone 3 for 4? Did anyone go for a 4 for 4? Which, by the way, they're more than usually. Often we only have an A B option, and there were a lot of like 3, 4, 5s. Hold it, Larry got 4 for 4. I'm impressed.
Oh, wow.
Good job.
Oh, man.
And
Congrats.
William Taluba got 0 for 4. Well, sorry about that. All right, I'm going to throw this to you, Nietzsche, in that thank you for Ox Security for sponsoring this. I specifically, we talked about this topic. It was related to what you're doing at Ox Security about the conversation about risk. I want to let you have the floor right now to explain how is Ox Security helping in this very issue about dealing with the conversation around risk. Explain.
Okay. So what we see is that usually the communication around application security is kind of around 3 major metrics. Of course, it depends on the maturity level, but those are whether you've got coverage in terms of covering all the application and covering all the technologies. So you got full understanding, then figuring out the remediation yesterday, saying, by this regulation, I need to fix severity X by this time, let's say 30 days, and then your ability to actually scale and mend the operation. And what Ox is trying to do is figure out, first of all, understanding what is going on in your AppSec. What are the coverage, breadth, and depth that you have? How can you then understand what are the issues that require attention in the context of your organization? Do a triage to them, because part of the challenge is you're going to take issues back to the developers and they're going to push back saying, this is a false positive, this is not connected to the internet, this is this and this is that. And now you need to figure out how do you automatically triage those issues and how do you digest what is just a 1% that can actually make a difference. And instead of calling the entire 100% a risk, you're actually saying, no, just 1% is a risk. The rest, yes, this is a hygiene problem that requires attention, but it's not a real risk right now. It can be if some conditions happen. And then, of course, allowing you to scale this program so you have great coverage across the board.
Excellent. All right. Well, guess what we just did? I just put up made visible a nice poll that we created. If you would like a nice warm handoff to the fine people over at Ox Security and you want sort of insight into this risk conversation or sort of help in the risk conversation you're trying to have. If you'd like a nice warm handoff to the fine people over at Ox Security, go ahead and click on that poll that I just made visible right now. If you look at the little bar chart, it's that little icon on the right. Click on that, you will see the poll. Also, let me remind you to register for next week's Super Cyber Friday event. In fact, we're going to be dark for 2 weeks after that, so you'll want to come to next events as well, because we'll be dark for 2 weeks because of work and holiday and all that other kind of nonsense. We'll be back on July 12th is what will happen. All right, let's get to our questions, of which we got a boatload of them have come in, and I do want to address our questions. All right. This comes from Hadass Kasorla. Okay, KPIs. This is obvious. We're going to get into this. Do you use your KPIs to talk about risk, measure the things that are risky for the business? If so, what are those KPIs based on? I'll talk with you, Tyre. Well, I'm going to just throw out that MTTR, mean time to remediate, is one of the really popular ones we hear all the time. But do you want to isolate this conversation about talking about risks or KPIs, or how KPIs can tell the story? I'm assuming both. What say you?
I like to have the risk as the driver for the entire security program. I'd like risk to actually be the first thing that you talk about before KPIs. So you actually put priorities on the items in your risk program based on what is the highest risk to an organization first. And once that is the case, then you design, how long should it take? Now, there are certain things that are SLAs. So that's actually a different topic. So the SLA for fixing a bug type thing, that takes priority at any point in time. That's not a KPI. That's an SLA. But the KPI is, did we achieve our risk reduction program correctly? Are the items that we are actually that we're achieving from what we've designed 6 months ago for our annual program on track? And that's how you track the KPIs. But the risk is what the entire security program is all about. And that's why you can describe it to engineers. When you tell an engineer, if you have an open port on a machine that is internet connected, they understand the tech part of this, but you tell them the risk to the businesses A, B, and C can happen, and they will actually understand it. The same thing to business people and so on.
Let me ask. This is something that I get a little hung up on, is that you make a very good point. Are we progressing in the right direction? But when you create these sort of like, we want to reduce this by this amount, we want to achieve this by this amount. Are these arbitrary numbers that we come up with? Oh, it'd be nice if it went, like, we always want things progressing in the right direction, but how do we set those goals? Where do we set those goals for ourselves, Nitzan?
I think part of the challenge is that we don't trust our data enough. And how does it look like? It looks like when you're going to take something and do a triage to an issue, you're actually going to figure out that maybe it is not as bad as you think. Maybe it's not internet connected. Maybe this specific API is not accessible or requires two-factor authentication. And the challenge becomes, okay, out of 100 issues, what is actually real and is a risk? Now, let's say that you want to apply the KPI discussion and you apply it to 100 different risks, but none of them are real, then it's just like going over and over the same circle, saying we're going to fix those issues, but those are not my main risk. Meaning, in reality, the risk will only be reduced when you hit the right API that is exposed, for example. The 99 others that you fix, great hygiene work, but unrelated to risk. So measuring the KPI really requires you to have data that you trust. And that's kind of the hard thing, at least in our field of application security.
We got this. I want to mention some of these 10% tips that we've gotten in. Hadass Kasorla, who was actually just asked the last question, said, once a year, create a presentation using Verizon Data Breach Investigation Report and Ponemon combined to talk about the costs and occurrence of issues, the types of issues, and the cost of those issues in the industry your company is in. Taher, A, have you done this? B, have you seen others do this? Is this valid to do this? Because I know the industry really leans on these two reports, especially Verizon DBIR. Or is it saying, well, and she does qualify like the issues your industry is in, or is it sort of saying, we need to be more targeted about what we're dealing with? These sort of grand reports don't affect us in particular. How do you feel about that?
Look, to design a good program, you need data. There needs to be data.
Going back to what Nitzan said, yes.
You have to have data. So when you look at these reports, and you can use your judgment. So an industry wide sort of report about how much it costs is an important piece of data. How do we compare to the rest of the companies in our industry is an interesting conversation. So you can actually use judgment there. But if there's no data, there's no way you're going to have a priority stack on what you need or don't need to do. You can't just use judgment. Now, we all know in the security world, and actually I answered that question that way myself. Hey, are we 90% secure, or are we better than the other guy next door, kind of thing? These are very difficult questions to answer because 90% secure doesn't mean anything at all. But to say that we are going to do a multi-factor authentication as a higher level, piece of the program than doing this detection thing, there needs to be a reason, and the reason relates to, is this a bigger exposure or not? So that priority conversation, has to result from some data. You cannot just have subjective information. My
Here,
opinion.
I'm going to jump to this question that Larry has, which, he says, do you find the non-technical leadership at companies have a hard time with the concept of risk tolerance? And if so, how do you address it? My feeling is they understand risks because they're in business. Business is in business risk. My question is, I want to qualify Larry's question is risk tolerance to cyber. I got to assume that is still confusing, and that really is the job of the CISO. Nitzan?
Yeah, so definitely part of the challenge is indeed understanding this concept of risk tolerance. So what is risk tolerance? Because let's say it's a number, but then you've got statistics saying once in a while somebody will be breached. Let's say you've got a very high risk tolerance, you'll still be breached once in a while. So it's a mentality change saying, okay, what are the basics that I need to do? And I think that over here, comparison is a great thing, saying it's not that I'm doing something completely different than the others. I've done all the basics, I've compared myself, I've educated myself with what everybody else from my peers are doing. So I'm not doing less than them. I don't have any blind spots. So that's a great entry point to that discussion, what others are doing. But risk tolerance, in reality, we've seen great posture faced with, I would say, a national grade opponent, and sometimes it doesn't end well for the defender. So it's something that risk tolerance is a nice term, but you kind of need to figure out who are you up against. And if you're up against script kiddies, great, you understand what you need to do. If you need to handle espionage group, harder, because this is with a lot of money. National grade, well, that's an issue. I don't think that it's solved right now.
What about this? And I'm sure I'm going to sort of describe a character to you, and I'm sure you've all sort of approached this. Is that, and by the way, I feel this character has softened over the years. I believe this character existed a few years ago, stronger and maybe a little softer now because of his understanding. But the person who's like, well, I don't want any of this to happen. Like, I want 100% security, although, some are realizing that's, a fallacy. But, like, I don't want any of this to happen. And then you have to sort of walk them back of like, okay, let's talk about like, minimizing damage, something like that. Like, you can't have 100% security. Like, how do you walk them back from, I don't get it, I don't want to see it, I don't want to understand it, just make sure it's all good, to no, let's have that talk about it, because I'm sure that person still exists. Yes, Taher?
Of course. I mean, do you want to spend $1 million to protect against the loss of a $10 item?
Right.
So the financial, industry has worked through this. You do not want to do that. So 100% security is a really stupid idea because, I do not know what even that means. But yes, the risk tolerance word is about, are we okay if there is a breach that only affects this part and, only results in this, and you can actually relate to it. It maps back into what controls you're actually designing. But what the non-technical people care about is, if one customer gets damaged, can you talk to them and remediate that versus your entire brand is damaged, for example. And so the tolerance is in fact important. And it doesn't have to be completely numerical numbers. But if an item happens, we need to understand if we're actually okay with that happening or not. And if it happens, which we probably will, if you're okay with it, then this is what you do if it happens. So yes, you can actually describe risk tolerance, but don't take it to, multi-factor authentication level technology, because they really don't care. And they actually hate doing it. Yeah.
All right. This is something we literally just did 2 episodes of our podcast about. It's a question from Ian Pointer. And have the new SEC requirements for public companies in the U.S. raise the profile of cybersecurity risk? I'm going to give a flat answer of yes on that. I mean, like, the point I always kind of point out is, have you noticed these cyber attacks? They're breaking in the Wall Street Journal and the New York Times. They didn't used to do that. Now they are. So it's on everybody's, profile, and it's also having serious material impact for it. What we have seen and what we discussed in the show is that, and I'd be interested to know, your insight on this, Nitzan, is the SEC is trying to figure this out as well. They don't have all the answers. That's why there's this vague thing about materiality, because they don't quite know either. We're all kind of looking forward to this, aren't we, Nitzan? Or not looking forward, but looking to try to figure out where the line is. I take it that way.
I think that it's a very loaded question. I think that there are a few cases right now running. I got to speak with some of the people that are going through such cases right now. Mm-hmm. And part of the challenge is that they're saying, look, this is not something that we could have understood upfront. It's something that you kind of learn looking backwards. And if you're asking whether the current requirements are increasing the bar on cybersecurity, I would go with maybe an unpopular answer saying no. What it is making is everybody fearing in speaking the truth or documenting the truth, because you don't want to be in a place that you are saying one thing internally and then communicating it in a different way externally.
Yes, so I think good point. This goes transparency, the opening comment. Yes.
It's actually going the other way. Instead of talking about what is right and in a transparent way, now you're in a place that somebody can recall all of your iMessages or emails and say, oh, you stated here that it's no risk, but internally you said, oh, wow, that's a big risk. And now everything that you communicate is against you.
Yeah, if you turn on that new Windows recall feature, then everything's going to be visible too as well. Watch out for that. Taher, yes. You're about to jump in?
But yeah, I mean, look, lessons from life says that the best way to judge something is to put yourself in the other person's seat. So, so if you're a CISO, put yourself in the board member seat. And the board member actually has responsibility for risk to the company and what do they need to know. So in this case, put yourself in the SEC person seat. They're supposed to actually do their job. Their job is to govern things. Now, the fact that nobody actually understands what cyber risk is, but they need to govern it is an interesting statement, but they need to do something. So the fact that you say, hey, you need to report a breach within X hours kind of thing is actually a silly idea. The detail is very silly, but the fact that there is guidance raises the profile of cyber risk in every organization. Now, hopefully, the thing will improve over time. So I'm a fan of the fact that they said something. I'm not a fan of the detail of what they said.
All right. We are going to, in just a couple of minutes, we are going to be playing our Department of Yes game. Stay tuned for that. And if you haven't registered for next week's event, remember, it's going to be our last one for like about 3 weeks, and then we'll have another one 3 weeks later. It's Hacking Generative AI Anxiety. And some bad ideas are coming in, so I like seeing that.
I actually like Ian's.
Bad ideas are awesome.
Oh, don't say anything yet. I'm gonna spring them on you during the Department of Yes. I mean, you can see them in our back channel too. All right, let me get to another question or two, and then we're gonna play the game. Let's see. This is a good question from Dr. X. How well have you seen risk acceptance by the C-suite? So I would love to hear a great story, because we've been talking about like they don't get it. I want to hear a great story from either one of you of a spectacular communications effort between security and the board or the C-suite, and how it was communicated well, and it was a poster child for how well it can be handled. Either one of you jump in on this.
I've been in this personally before, but I'm not going to say the detail, of course.
Give me an idea of what the conversation was and why it went well.
The conversation was, look, examples from the industry. This happened to this organization. This happened to that organization. This person lost their job after this happened. This company lost this. And this company had to change the entire management team because this happened, that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And you describe the risk to the organization that way, and the result was the security was the number one topic for the entire company for a whole year.
Wow. Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, examples. It's like we say, tell a story. Nitzan, any other sort of examples you've seen or examples of great conversations?
So I think that I took place in one of those events that you start with the fog of war. Nothing is understood. You just have an event. And during the first hour, everybody just wants to understand what is happening. And unfortunately, usually at the first hour, you don't know what is happening. You're still trying to understand what are you actually looking at. Is it a real thing? Is it a false positive? What is it? Now, as time goes by, you kind of have something concrete, the first concrete evidence that something did happen. And then the conversation splits immediately to two tracks. One, how did it happen? And the second, okay, what are we doing next? Now, my humble opinion, during that stage, the question, how did it happen? Even though very satisfying sometimes, it's the wrong question to ask. It is simply focusing on what gets next. And if the conversation derails, like I've seen in one case, to how did it happen? Yes, it will go on for a year, but the event itself will continue for weeks until it is resolved.
All right. Let's go to our next game.
Hello, welcome to the Department of Yes, where no request is ever rejected.
All right. We are playing the Department of Yes. Taher, Nitzan, this is how it's played. I have some bad ideas from our audience, and it's how not to communicate risk. And I'm going to go with this first one from Hadass Kasorla, who says, and I'll start with you, Nitzan. So both of you have to answer this. Remember, you cannot be facetious. You have to communicate why you actually want to do this idea. Your immediate answer is, yes, we're doing this, and how you're going to pull this off and why it's a good idea. So Hadass says, every time the board or C-suite asks about risks, just say the word risk over and over again until it loses all meaning whatsoever. So it's like, it's living in Smurf Village is what it's like. Just keep saying Smurf everything. Just say risk everything. It will have less meaning. Why do you want to do this, Nitzan?
First of all, sounds like a great idea. It will definitely emphasize the fact that there is a risk. And if by the time that the conversation ends, somebody did not get the fact that there is a risk, then maybe it's risky business to have them on board. But
I don't know.
Yes!
I'm giving you a yes. I'm giving you both on that because yes, it's going to communicate risk is important, but why we wanted to lose all meaning. What's the value of doing just that, Nitzan? What's your suggestion?
So repeating the same words in my...
I'm sorry, Nitzan. I'm sorry. I was pointing to... I'm sorry. Nitzan already got your answer. So I'm going to Taher now. Taher, you say risk all over the... It loses all meaning. Why do we want to do this? Why is this a good idea from Hadass?
Because it needs to be a common vocabulary for a board member. It needs to be part of the thinking. So losing all meaning is an interesting way to put it. But when you hear risk, it just gets to the back of your mind, and it just, you don't hear it anymore, but it's part of your thinking. So the fact that it lost the meaning is interesting because it became a de facto in how you're thinking about things.
I'm literally just holding on to your logic. It's by a thin thread. I'm holding on to your logic, Taher. All right, here we go. I'm going to give you another one. I like this one from Larry Rosen. All right, I'm going to start with you, Taher, on this one. When asked about risk, the CEO should say, risk, schmisk, this is a rocket ship to an IPO. What's your thought on that? Why do you want to do it? And by the way, this is the CEO talking, not the security department. But why should the CEO behave like this?
Behave like risk is a good thing to talk about?
Well, no, he said, this is what the CEO says. Risk miss is the rocket ship to the IPO. Should we follow that? Just say, that's it. Forget about risk. We're going to IPO this company.
Forget about risk.
That's pretty much what it sounds like with the CEO. So what's your take on this? Why does the security department want to back this?
Why is this a great thing?
Yes.
So it's a great thing because when you get to the IPO, you have all the resources to manage the risk.
Mm-hmm.
So don't worry about risk.
Oh, that's a good point. You're going to have the money to manage the risk.
When you're a smaller
That's
firm,
your best answer. Because if you're dealing with no money in the beginning, but you get all that money through IPO, then you'll have the security budget. Good point. All right, Nitzan, why do you want to do this?
Definitely, we're in a small stretch. A few more months, we'll get to the promised land. Definitely, it's not a time right now to slow down and divert the resources to other things beside the main business line.
By the
Definitely.
way, I will say, not specifically IPO, but we got to release this product, secure or not. It's getting released. So, I'm giving you both redeemed yourself on that last one. Good job, both of you. Excellent job. All right. Let's remember to click the link at the bottom of the screen. We have we have 14 minutes left in our conversation. A ton more questions. So let me get this. I don't even know if this is true. So you can answer quick yes or no for this one from James Sparenberg. For small business, is there a clearinghouse for data on what my risk should be? I can't imagine that some general thing like that exists. Yes, no? What do you think, Tahir?
So here is my answer. I get that question a lot, actually.
Oh, do you? Okay.
So my answer is a small business outsources most things except the risk. If you don't understand the risk, you can never build a business. That's my answer to this.
That is a good point.
So a small business, a big risk to a small business may not be a risk to a big business. I'll take that. Mm-hmm. But a small business does have risk. Like if somebody drives a car into your front window and you're selling donuts, that's a risk. So, don't have a front glass in front, that kind of thing. There's always a risk to every business. Understanding the business means understanding the risk. That's my opinion.
And Nitzan, anything quick to add to that?
No, nothing smart. Same as there. You need to own the risk.
Yes.
Don't outsource it, please. That's my bag to everyone.
By the way, Ed Odenwalder thought IPO equals security budget. He's amused by that. I will say that.
Told me I have to answer.
By the way, I think this question is for you. This comes from Ed Odenwalder, and I didn't pay him to ask this. Nitzan, any recommendations regarding tools useful in board C-suite reporting? Sometimes more risk, GRC tools down in the weeds, lack executive level risk reporting, something that maybe Ox Security can help with. What do you suggest?
So I think that the board has two different sets. One is the metrics. This is usually not the discussion in the board, unless something really goes bad. I think most of the discussion is simply on going forward, how do we drive the business initiatives and how do security join those business initiatives versus let's talk about your KPI and what's going on. If, on the other hand, you're failing to provide the confidence to the board that the ongoing is managed, yes, this will become the discussion, and that's a very, very bad discussion to have. So having the KPIs in a straightforward way, saying, this is my status, this is where I'm going, and so on, definitely a great way to prepare towards a board. Definitely, my experience, the wrong way to manage a board meeting. But Tahir?
Here is an example of a bank board. So a board member in a bank needs to understand what the business of the bank is. Is that, a company or an individual put their money in and expect to fund the money back on whatever the agreement is. So they need to understand the risk of if the money disappears, that customer is going to be, either gone or suing them or something. So every board member in every company needs to understand the business. And by understanding the business, they do need to understand the risks of the business. What can happen that can harm me? The fact that there's a cyber slant to it is interesting. And it's our duty to explain this. But the risk to the business is something that every board member in every company does and need to understand.
Mm-hmm. Here's a question that came in from Vador. says, do you have any advice on how to manage transferred risk that has a direct impact on your organization? For example, third party down, which affects your services. So this is a question that we had come up on one of our shows of, say there's a third party that you really, really want to work with. They really have this great solution and you have to work with them, but they carry a significant risk. The business wants to use them. And again, I know I'm talking really vague here, every case is different kind of a situation, but how do you sort of talk about and address that kind of an issue, Taher?
It's part of signing up with the third party to begin with.
Okay.
So even if you love the thing, that risk conversation has to happen ahead of time.
Mm-hmm.
And contractually, if necessary. So if you're dependent on a third party, that agreement has to happen ahead of time. And whether you're moving the risk across if something happens, and who's liable for what, that conversation is in fact important and needs to be a part of the business conversation. This is not something that you tell the board after the fact. The board will be pissed, basically.
Neitson, anything to add to that?
Yeah, I've got a different opinion on that one. Meaning,
okay,
how do we assess right now third-party vendors? We give them a questionnaire. Now, those questionnaires are usually very, very basic, saying, do you have this product? Yes. Do you have antivirus? Yes. Do you have this? Yes. So the posture of most of your vendors is going to be exactly the same. Now, let's correlate those questions to actual breaches happening in random. The same vendors that answer yes on all those topics are still the ones that get breached, are the same guys that have SOC 2 and the same guys that applied for ISO. So I think that while it provides some kind of a comfort level saying we've done the basics, it has nothing to do with the actual risk that the organization carries. And we work with hundreds of organizations. I can tell you for sure, everybody has their own, I would say, risks inside the house. I think the question is, how do you manage them? And do you actually carry, or does the promise of security carry any weight in that specific organization? Because everybody can be hit right now by a new thing, a new malware, a new phishing campaign, a new open source vulnerability. And yesterday it wasn't there, today it's there. So it's really about the responsiveness, the reactiveness, that there is somebody that said, I own this and I'm going to react so the risk won't get to my customer.
All right, I'm going to do a quick thing to sort of wrap up our discussion, but I'm going to come back and we'll have a final comments here. By the way, you have just literally a minute or two. That link at the bottom of the screen is going to change in just a second. I want to thank your company, Neatson, Ox Security, for sponsoring this very episode of Super Cyber Friday. Thank you for supporting us. By the way, I don't know if you know, if you're not subscribed to our newsletter, on Sundays we drop a newsletter of the best quotes. We pull them from the chat, and we pull them from both you, Neatson, and Taher, from our guests as well. So make sure that you subscribe to our newsletter so you'll get that on Sunday. All right, in just about 97 minutes, we have our cybersecurity headlines we can review, and a return guest, Janet Hines, who's the CISO over at ChenMed, will be our guest, talking about the biggest stories in cyber this week with our host, none other than the more talented Richard Straffolino. So stick around for that as well. So our meetup. So yes, oh, look at that. Aaron's on it. So we are on Discord now, and you can't see it because it's super small, but what you'll see is if you look on, when you log into Discord, you'll click on this link, and you can do it now. When you log into Discord, the very last link will say audio sessions, and it'll say Super Cyber Meetup. Please click on that where it says Super Cyber Meetup. And down here, you can check your settings with your audio and video. So go ahead and do that as well. Do you want to sponsor a Super Cyber Friday? Well, guess what? Our next one available will be July 19th. And if you want to do that, just email me at info@cisoseries.com. All right. We have just 6 minutes left. I'm going to start with you, Neatson. Oh, and also, by the way, a lot of you have responded. That's great. Please go to our poll if you would like a nice, warm handoff to the fine people over at Ox Security, because we only have a few minutes that'll be open. So please go select that poll as well. All right, Neatson, with just a few minutes we have left, Is there anything that we have not brought up in our discussion about the conversation around risks that we should have addressed? What do you think, Nitzan?
So I'd probably say that there are two things that I would like to mention. First one is, what's the framework to handle risk? So first, it is being able to understand what it is, quantify it, detect it, then try to prevent it. And at that point, you kind of say, okay, let's say I can prevent X amount of it, 95% of it. How do I respond if it passes that? And start thinking not just about the actual detection and prevention, but also how do you respond in case the prevention failed you? And how do you think about the incident at that point of time? So in application security, do you have the logs to even understand what happened? Do you have the right logs to understand and you can actually collect them and you've got enough rotation? So it's just thinking about risk, not just in the sense that how do I avoid being hit for the first time? It's thinking on all dimensions, including, do you have the detection? Do you have the capability to prevent it? Do you have the ability to do the incident response? And then the most important thing, let's say that something did happen. How do you learn from it? How do you add this knowledge back into the DNA of the organization? So in the next event, you won't be failing on the same, principles.
All right, very good. I throw this to you, Taher, the same exact question that I just asked. Is there anything that we have not brought up in this conversation about a risk that you'd like to bring up?
I think there needs to be a focus, and maybe from this community at large, on communicating risk reduction measures. Mm-hmm. We go and ask for budget, and we ask for budget because there is risk to the business. Communicating whether what we have done has in fact reduced the risk is an important thing, because the board is providing funding, and that kind of communication is very specific. It's actually not trivial to do, because you're funding, identification and detection and protection and recovery and all of that stuff. And why did these things get funded, and did that actually really result in risk reduction? It's hard to provide evidence of risk reduction, because events that did not happen are not something you can talk about very easily. But there does need to be a way to communicate risk reduction, because the board actually needs. We need to speak the board's language.
And it brings it full circle to what you were discussing at the very beginning of our event. Well, I want to thank you very much, Taher El-Gamal, and also Nitzan Ziv, and also your awesome company, Ox Security, for sponsoring this very episode. Gentlemen, please, we're going to go over to Discord after this. If you have more questions for them, please do it. If you have not clicked on the poll, please do that. If you forgot to click on the link to register for next week's event, don't worry. You can always go to CISOseries.com. The link will be at the top of the page there for next week's event, and also you can go to our events page and see it there as well. Thank you so much. Please, everybody, click the link at the bottom. Aaron, take us out.